The dog who wouldn't look away. The fire had nearly burned out, leaving nothing but the faint glow of smoldering embers behind the blackened logs. Yet Daisy wouldn't stop staring. Her golden fur shimmered in the dim light, the soft glow of the dying fire reflecting in her wide, unblinking eyes. Her ears were perked, her body frozen except for the slow, steady rhythm of her breath. She wasn't just looking, she was waiting. I knelt beside her, running a hand along her back. "Daisy, what is it, girl?" She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Her gaze stayed locked onto the fireplace, like she expected something, or someone, to emerge from the shadows inside. I swallowed hard and glanced around the room. The house was quiet, wrapped in the kind of eerie stillness that only late-night hours bring. Outside, the wind whistled through the trees, rustling the last of the fallen leaves across the porch. My parents were asleep upstairs, and my little brother Ben was out cold in his room, exhausted from football practice earlier that day. The only sound in the house was the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the occasional crackle of burning wood. I turned back to the fireplace. It was just a fireplace. The same one we had gathered around for years, through Christmas mornings, snowstorms, and nights when the power went out, forcing us to tell stories in the dark. Nothing was different. And yet, something was. The feeling of something watching. A strange feeling settled over me, like the air itself had changed. I ran my fingers over the bricks, searching for something. Anything. Unusual. A loose stone. A draft? Maybe a mouse had crawled inside, and Daisy had sensed it. But nothing felt out of place. Still, Daisy let out a low whimper, not the kind that begged for food or attention, but something deeper, sadder. It was the kind of sound she made when she knew something I didn't. "Come on, girl. There's nothing there," I whispered, giving her collar a soft tug. She didn't budge. Her tail stayed stiff, her breathing slow and controlled. I sighed, debating whether to just leave her be. Maybe she'd snap out of it on her own. But then, something shifted. It wasn't a noise, not exactly. More like the air itself thickened, as if the space around me had grown heavier. And then I heard it. A sound so faint, so delicate, that I almost thought I had imagined it. A whisper. No, not a whisper. A breath. Right inside the fireplace. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Daisy stood up, her stance firm, her tail flicking with unease. My mind raced for explanations. A draft. The wind sneaking in through the chimney. But the doors were locked. The windows were shut. And the fire, now almost entirely dead, had been burning just fine moments ago. I swallowed hard and leaned in again, the heat from the dying embers warming my face. The breath came again. Closer. Louder. I gripped the fire poker and nudged the logs, watching as ash swirled up in a ghostly cloud. Still, nothing. Then Daisy lunged. I barely had time to react before she darted forward, her body diving straight into the fireplace. "Daisy, no," I yelled, grabbing for her collar. She ignored me, her nose burrowing into the ashes, her paws frantically scratching at the soot-covered bricks. She wasn't just sniffing, she was digging. Desperate, frantic, unstoppable. I dropped the poker and reached into the mess she was making, my fingers brushing against the brickwork, feeling for whatever had her so riled up. And then, I felt it. Something small, cold, wedged between the cracks of the old stone. I pulled it free. My breath caught in my throat. A tiny, rusted locket. The secret in the fireplace. My fingers trembled as I brushed away the soot, revealing the delicate engraving on the surface. It wasn't ours. I had never seen it before. And yet, our family had lived in this house for generations. I turned it over in my palm, searching for a way to open it. Daisy sat beside me now, her tail wagging ever so slightly. But her eyes never left the fireplace. Finally, with a soft click, I pried the locket open. Inside was a faded black and white photo. A little girl, smiling, bright-eyed, her hair tied with a delicate ribbon. The moment I saw her face, the room felt colder. Daisy let out a quiet huff, like she had been waiting for me to figure it out. I swallowed. "Who are you?" I whispered, staring at the photograph. The whisper came again. This time, closer. Not a whisper, a sigh. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the air shifted back. The heaviness lifted. The warmth of the dying fire returned to the space. The house was still silent. Daisy was calm now, relaxed. Whatever had held her so intensely before had passed, but I wasn't sure I would ever feel the same again. A name from the past. Clutching the locket tight in my fist, I stood up and backed away from the fireplace. There was a story here, a history buried beneath soot and stone. And Daisy had just uncovered the first piece of it. I just had to decide if I was ready to find out the rest. The weight of the locket felt heavier in my palm, the longer I stood there, staring at the faded photograph. The little girl's smile was frozen in time, a memory lost in the ashes of the past. I turned it over again. There was an inscription on the back, barely legible through the rust and grime. I squinted, rubbing my thumb over the faint engraving, coaxing the words out from beneath years of soot. For Charlotte. My breath caught in my throat. Charlotte. That name didn't belong to anyone in my family. Not as far as I knew. I glanced down at Daisy, who had finally settled, her front paws stretched forward, and her head resting on them. Her deep brown eyes were still locked onto the fireplace. She wasn't panicked anymore. But she wasn't at ease either. It was like she was waiting. A shiver ran down my spine. I needed to know more. I needed to figure out where this locket had come from, who it had belonged to, and why Daisy had led me straight to it. The truth beneath the ashes. The house was quiet again, but I wasn't. I stood in the dim light of the kitchen, staring down at the rusted locket resting in my palm. The name on the back, Charlotte, felt like a whisper from the past, a thread pulling me into something much older than I had realized. I turned back toward the fireplace, where Daisy lay curled up on the floor. She wasn't anxious anymore, but she wasn't relaxed either. It was like she was waiting for me to understand. I swallowed hard and picked up my phone. If this house had a history, I needed to know what it was. A name that shouldn't exist. I typed into a search engine. Charlotte Whitmore plus missing person plus history of this house. At first, nothing came up. Just generic history about our town, a few archived real estate listings. But then, a newspaper clipping, dated 1952. Local girl, age 7, vanishes without a trace. My fingers trembled as I clicked the link. The article was grainy, the text slightly faded, but the words hit me like a punch to the gut. Charlotte Whitmore, age 7, was last seen near her family home on Pinecrest Drive. The search lasted several weeks, but no trace of the child was ever found. The Whitmore family, devastated, left town the following year. No further leads have ever surfaced. Pinecrest Drive. That was my street. I exhaled sharply, staring at the photograph attached to the article. A black and white image of a little girl with bright eyes and a ribbon in her hair. The same girl in the locket. A cold shiver crept down my spine. The letter hidden in the archives. I kept digging, searching through library records, old town documents, anything I could find. And then, I stumbled upon something buried deep in the town's archives. A letter, dated 1953, titled, "To the future owner of this home." My breath hitched as I clicked on the scanned document. The faded ink read, "If you find this letter, please know that we never stopped looking for her. We never stopped hoping she would come back. If you ever find any trace of her, please don't turn away. Remember her name, Charlotte." My heart pounded. I glanced at Daisy, who was now sitting up, watching me, her tail giving a slow, deliberate wag. She knew. Somehow, she had always known. The final clue. I turned back toward the fireplace, staring into its dark depths. The locket. The name. The whispers. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Slowly, cautiously, I stepped forward. I ran my fingers along the bricks, pressing gently, feeling for something hidden. Then, click. A single brick shifted, just slightly, but enough for me to feel it move. My breath caught. I pressed harder, pushing the brick inward. And suddenly, it slid free. Behind it, a small, hollow space. And inside, a tiny, dust-covered wooden box. My hands trembled as I pulled it out, carefully brushing away the years of soot and ash. I pried it open, the old hinges creaking in protest. Inside was a bundle of old, yellowed papers, tied together with a faded pink ribbon. The top paper held just one sentence, written in shaky handwriting. She was here. We know she was here. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. Who had written this? And why? I flipped through the other pages. More notes. More desperate messages. We heard her calling, but she was gone before we got to her. We searched everywhere. The fireplace, the attic, the cellar, but Charlotte never came home. My stomach churned. I had expected a mystery. But this was something more. Something buried beneath this house for decades. The last whisper. Daisy let out a low whimper, nudging my hand with her nose. I closed the box, gripping it tightly. Whatever happened to Charlotte Whitmore, it hadn't been an accident. And somehow, this house still remembered. The air shifted again, just for a moment. A soft breath, a faint whisper, and then silence. I swallowed hard, glancing down at Daisy. Her tail wagged just once, like she was telling me it was over. The truth had been found, and Charlotte could finally rest. A mystery no longer forgotten. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the locket and the box of letters in front of me. I knew what I had to do. I would take everything I had found to the Historical Society. Charlotte's story deserved to be told. She had been lost in the ashes for too long, and thanks to Daisy, she had finally been found. As I reached down to scratch Daisy behind the ears, she leaned into my touch, letting out a contented sigh. And for the first time since this began, I felt at peace too. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.